Welcome to the X of Swords, the latest adventure in the world of the X-Men. This is the channel Comicstorian, where we sometimes read your favorite comic books to you in a poor man's audio drama, or we give you knowledge on the comic book world so that you are becoming the comic book expert. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of both, because the X of Swords is a storyline taking place in the newest run for the X-Men. It starts at about issue 12 of the regular X-Men books, and while I would love to spend a bunch of weeks going over X-Men 1 through 11, I thought it would be more interesting to bring you the X of Swords storyline with a little bit of a recap as to where we are in the world of the X-Men. That's simply because the X of Swords storyline is very linear, and it should allow a lot of you to get to know the new world of the X-Men, and then we can decide if we're going to go back here at Comicstorian. So let's start with what you need to know. In the era of Dawn of X, Professor Xavier and Magneto established the mutant nation on the island of Krakoa. The mutants established their own government, allowing mutants from all over the world to come live in peace on the island of Krakoa. Krakoa was ruled over by the Quiet Council, which was made up of 12 members from a mixture of heroic and villainous mutants around the world. While the mutants of Krakoa have continued to fight oppression and bigotry across the entire globe, the fear of death has begun to elude them due to the ability of the Five to resurrect any mutants that have died. Shockingly, Apocalypse joined the nation of Krakoa, informing the mutants that this is what he had been fighting for all along, that he had been working on his own agenda this entire time. Working alongside the group known as Excalibur, Apocalypse established the external gate that would lead to Otherworld. Apocalypse also came into contact with a being known as the Summoner, who claims to be his grandson. Then, the true nature of the mutants was revealed, and this is now their mythology. Long ago, there was a land known as Okara, where the mutants first lived, but a horde of demons attacked them and the land was split into two islands, Arakoa and Krakoa. Apocalypse protected Krakoa and the rest of the Earth, but Arakoa was pulled into the Hell dimension to live forever with the demons. But the mutants of Arakoa continued to fight, led by Apocalypse's wife, Genesis. Eventually, Genesis would fall, and as the demons began to win, Summoner went in search of his grandfather. Now, Apocalypse has sent his grandson back, along with Banshee and Eunice, to herald his return to Arakoa. He will come and he will save the day. He will bring back Arakoa to the proper dimension. Meanwhile, he gathers the forces of mutant kind in preparation for a war with the demons. The armies gather outside the last watchtower in the kingdom of Dryador in Otherworld. One of the gods, dressed as Anubis, looks on at the tower that has so long defied them. That tower, it offends me. It has always offended me. He growls. His siblings agree, angered that they have not feasted on the bones of the free people in the free land for some time. His sister turns, the flames of her being curling upwards. Say the word, and I'll give you your war, she tells them. Death, death to all of them. With a raise of her hand, the demonic horde charges forward, weapons of war assaulting the tower. Inside, one of the Delore rush forward, reporting to their king of this disaster. The king yells for his squire, who gives him his scepter and orders him to fly to Saturn IX to warn her of what happens. The squire hops aboard his pterodactyl, flying away. Famine looks up, seeing the rider trying to escape. Do we want any word getting out? They ask. Only if the word is true. Put your mark on him, sister, Death says, looking at Pestilence. Pestilence draws her bow, firing, and the arrow sails through the air, piercing the messenger's chest. Let them know that we are coming, Pestilence whispers. Later in the Starlight Citadel, the attendants tell their queen to stay back as the messenger continues to curl up in a ball on the floor, his lips moving as he whispers warnings of the walls falling. They lean in, trying to understand him, when finally the messenger uses the last of his strength to scream his warning. The tower has fallen! Araco has fallen! He screams. Saturn IX turns to her attendants. I need the cards, she commands. The attendants step through a portal to another time and another place, with others pulling a creature from the heart of a great light. The tentacled monster snarls at them, speaking in a language that has been lost to time. Don't be like that. You shouldn't think of this as your end, but as a fulfillment of what you're supposed to be, the chief attendant tells the creature. She holds out her hand and the creature condenses down to fit in her palm. Saturn IX, the omniversal ruler, walks through the Starlight Citadel, and in the depths of her palace, the creature has been forged into an amulet. Saturn 9 takes that amulet, turning to one of her attendants, and the young woman opens up a box revealing a stack of golden cards. "Let's see what the future holds, shall we?" Saturn 9 whispers as she takes up both objects. She draws the first card, which is the card of judgment, the death of death and the new way forward. The card shows Apocalypse standing before a gate. The Four of Wands, a family that has been fighting for eons, has one final confrontation. The card depicts 4 horsemen fighting hordes of monsters. The Hanged Man, Apocalypse leading a group of mutants through a gate. The 8 of Clubs, a queen with 2 faces. The 10 of Swords, Apocalypse standing surrounded by swordsmen. Meanwhile, 3 mutants stand guard at the external gate on Araco Point. A noise sounds telling them that something is coming through, and the gems shatter as a massive tentacle creature comes through. The being known as the Summoner on its back. "Help me, please!" he yells, cradling Banshee. They quickly bring him to the healing chambers, where the healer orders them to be careful. His life force is flickering, he warns, and Apocalypse quickly appears, questioning his grandson. "We were ambushed on the other world, on the way to Araco. There was an army on the march, grandfather. There is a war underway," Summoner warns. Apocalypse nods. "Come with me." In a short time, the pair stand before the Quiet Council as Apocalypse informs them of the recent events. At first, Magneto questions why Apocalypse would create the external gate in the first place, but the ancient mutant merely looks at Krakoa. Krakoa acknowledges and accepts the gift of the external gate. Cypher translates once the living island rumbles in response. Apocalypse continues explaining the history of the land of Okara, Krakoa, and Araco. He tells them of Summoner's return, of him sending his grandson back through the gate. Summoner steps forward explaining how he, Banshee, and Eunice stepped through that gate. The gate opens up in the middle of Otherworld. We looked up and we were blinded by the majesty of the Starlight Citadel in the sky, and we did not see what waited on the horizon. It was the Dark Army that had broke Araco. Serving the Twilight Sword, they hate the living and they love annihilation, Summoner explains, describing the trio's fight against the demonic hordes. Eunice was captured, Banshee was wounded, and I fled with him and returned here. I bring the fall of Araco. My message is of an unavoidable end of this world. Wonderful, Emma Frost whispers. The council begins to argue, and Shaw orders Apocalypse to shut the gate and lock out the armies, but the others argue against leaving Eunice and the Starlight Citadel to their fates. Jean stands, stating that she'll get Scott and the others to lead a rescue mission. No, I will go. Apocalypse rumbles, and Mr. Sinister smiles. Perfect. You walk through, and then we shut the door behind you. I have to say, after a mundane start, this meeting is really beginning to pick up. They continue to discuss the purpose of the external gate, and Apocalypse informs them that it is not merely mutants who can use it. Then we should destroy it. Now, Emma states, and the council agrees, taking a vote on the matter, but though the vote passes, Cypher interjects and informs them that Krakoa orders that the gate remain open. Apocalypse is not shocked, and he knows that he and the island want the same thing, but it is Magneto that leans forward, telling him that whatever he is planning on doing, he does so without the aid of the council. Of course, I will ask for volunteers. Apocalypse nods. A short time later, the group gathers at the external gate. Havoc, Lorna, Archangel, Beast, Siren, Richter, Monette, Summoner, and Apocalypse. They've all gathered, and they volunteered for their own reasons. And with that, they step through the portal to Araco to save the day, to prevent a war with the demons. Though in the healing gardens, Rachel is watching over the injured Banshee. She hears a voice and looks up to see young Cable entering the chamber. I know that look. Looks like trouble. He smiles at her, and Rachel looks back at Banshee. She and Nate can both hear it. His mind is screaming, and they both put their hands on the man's temple, ready to dive into his mind. The group, meanwhile, is stepping through the gate, shocked to see the massive horde of demons attacking the lower reaches of the Starlight Citadel. Look there! Beast cries, seeing Eurus being captured and tortured. A demonic warden stands guard, and the monster looks at Apocalypse and points. My God, the ancient mutant whispers, and looking in the distance, he sees the 4 horsemen riding over their armies. Who are they? Archangel asks him. My light, my fire, something lost I dared not believe to find. My sons, my daughters, they are my children. Apocalypse tells them, as he begins to stride towards the army. Meanwhile, back at the Healing Gardens, Rachel and Nate are looking through the memories that are passing through Banshee's mind. How this all began, when Banshee, Eurus, and Summoner all went through the gate. The trio step through the external gate, finding themselves in Otherworld, where they're greeted by the massive army of demons. Summoner steps forward, walking towards their herald. But in our current time period, in Otherworld, Apocalypse strides towards his family. He kneels down, not able to believe that they are still alive. "Father, please stand," Death tells him. Apocalypse stands, gathered around his sons and daughters. "Tell me of Araco. If it fell, by what miracle have you returned to me?" he asks them. They tell him what they've been through, that they've been through hell, that their mother fell to the Twilight Blade. "I'm sorry," Apocalypse tells them. But War steps forward, telling him that regret is for the weak. "Would you like to know the one thing that kept us alive all those years?" she asks. She reaches forward, caressing his cheek. "It wasn't love," she snarls, her blade coming up fast, piercing Apocalypse's chest as Summoner stabs him in the back. Siren reacts fast, her voice quaking the ground around them, throwing the horsemen away. But meanwhile, in Banshee's mind, Nate and Rachel see as this all started. They see that once Summoner, Banshee, and Eurus entered, Summoner turned, an evil smile on his face. The demons attacked, the mutants fought back, but the memories begin to shift, and suddenly they're looking down at the Starlight Citadel, on Saturn 9, watching the hordes beneath them. The ruler looks up, staring back at the watching humans. "I see you looking, mutant. But you're looking at the wrong thing," she hisses, staring up into the memories, and an image quickly flashes through their minds. In the healing chamber, Nate and Rachel are tossed back. The two mutants are shocked, and Rachel orders Nate to go tell their parents. "I'm going to stay here and go back into Banshee's head and see if there's anything else to unlock," Rachel tells Cable. Back in Otherworld, Saturn 9 comes out of her trance and walks through the palace. It is almost time. She looks down from the Starlight Citadel at the war beneath them. "Tell me, are you going to help them?" her attendant asks. Beneath the Citadel, the mutants continue to fight against the demonic horde. "We have to get Apocalypse back through the gate!" Rockslide yells as he fights against the monsters. "You can't save him, friend!" "He cannot be saved," Summoner warns Rockslide. He summons a shadowy blade into his hands and then cuts the mutant in half in a single blow. Richter continues to drag Apocalypse forward, but suddenly a black arrow pierces his chest. "Alex! Time for a tactical retreat!" Beast yells. "You go. Get help. I'll stay here and make sure nobody gets through that gate," Alex tells him as he and Lorna continue to fight. Meanwhile, back on the mainland, Cable arrives at the Summers home on the moon, yelling for his mom and dad, Jean and Cyclops. He quickly fills them in on what's happening, Jean linking their minds so that he can share his memories easily. But the image that was shown, that Saturn 9 showed to Cable, is the image of a strange orb-like object. Cable asks if they know what it is, and Scott nods, telling him that he even knows where to find it. Meanwhile, back in Otherworld, the mutants continue to fight. Monette looks up, questioning why the Starlight Citadel isn't aiding them. "Maybe you should invite them to join us," Lorna offers, using her powers to toss aside another group of demons. Monette suddenly appears before Saturn 9, yelling at her for not aiding the mutants. "I'll do as I please, child, and I promise, it won't have anything to do with the whims of you and your ilk. Now run along," the Queen says to her. With a wave of her hand, the psychic image of Monette shatters. On the ground, the mutant is thrown aside, landing hard. "That is not a nice woman," she whispers, Alex looking up from the fight. "Well, maybe she needs some encouragement to do the right thing. That Citadel's a mighty big piece of floating metal, Lorna," he tells her. So Lorna reaches out her hands, using her powers to grab the Citadel. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Summer family takes several gates to find their destination. They suddenly appear in front of that massive orb. "Okay, wow, there it is. So what is it?" Nate asks. Back in Otherworld, the Citadel begins to twist and fall towards the planet. Her attendants warn that they will be pulled out of the sky, but Saturn 9 doesn't think so. Everything is as she has foreseen it. She holds up her hand, flashing light suddenly filling the sky. "And now it is time to show all who exactly rules this land, forever constant and without question," she says. Suddenly, the Queen and her attendants stand on the battlefield, and with a snap, everything stops moving. The real question is, what am I going to do with all of you? She wonders. Unfreeze me? Monette answers in mid-punch. But meanwhile, back with our other friends. Standing before the orb, Scott Summers tells them that he believes that this is the igniter that powers the whole station, but you need an independent power source to start it. "Hey Dad, I think I got an idea," Cable says, stepping forward with his glowing sword. Back on the battlefield, Saturn 9 steps up to Death, questioning what made them think that they could march an army into her lands. You think we answer to you, witch? Death snarls. Saturn IX just glares. In this land, all answer to me, she tells him. Magic suddenly swirling around the horseman as she demands to know what right he has come. By the right of the Twilight Sword and our liege who wields it, he tells her, warning that her magic, nor his destruction is enough to deter them. We will have Krakoa, and the way through there is through here. If we have to break 1,000,000 bodies against the walls of your citadel, we will. You have my word. The queen leans forward, demanding to know if Death is willing to fight in a manner of their choosing. We will meet you in any arena of your choosing. He snarls at her. The queen smiles, standing back up. In 3 days' time, I will summon your champions of Arakko to duel with the champions of Otherworld. Death bows before her, telling her that it won't matter who she sends. The attendant steps forward, questioning who their champion will be. Who will fight for Starlight Citadel? Who will fight and die to stop the Arakko horde from traveling from here to Krakoa? The queen smiles, turning back to the mutants. Now, child, speak. Screw you, Monette snaps. Yeah, we'll fight, Alex nods. The queen holds up her hands and the magic swirls again. Lorna and Pestilence begin to recite the 10 swords that will do their battle. And meanwhile, back in deep space, Nate places his sword into the orb. Back on the battlefield, Saturn IX declares that they have 3 days, and in space, the Sword Orbital Space Station activates. Siren pulls Richter through the gate, trying to get him to the Healing Gardens. But the man falls, diseased tumors growing on his body. Siren takes a deep breath, screaming for help that echoes across the island. Archangel and Beast try to tend to Apocalypse, who is also injured, but the ancient mutant has a massive hole in his chest. There is little that they can do. Where's Richter? Apocalypse questions, tumors appearing on his face, and he turns his head, seeing the dying mutant close at hand. Richter, can you hear me? Fight this poison, damn you! I'm you in fights! He snarls at the young man. Suddenly, the other mutants arrive, working to get the 2 wounded to the healing chambers. Before they can leave, though, the others come back through the portal, bringing with them the remains of Rockslide. Dead, Lorna whispers when Dr. Ray questions his status. In Otherworld, Saturn IX watches Lorna, who is acting Oracle for Krakoa, and the Queen wonders whether she figured anything out. She steps up to the external gate, holding a ball of magic in her hand. In the meantime, let us ensure that there will be no further trespassers into Otherworld, she says, throwing the magical orb at the gate, sealing it off with gems. The mutants scatter as the gems explode out of the gate on the Krakoa side. On Krakoa, the island begins to rumble in its anger that it has now been sealed off from its sister island, Arakko. Later, Rachel is diving through Lorna's mind, but Saturn IX is suddenly there, throwing her out. I told you no getting past that witch! You just triggered the same psychic trap that I tried to get past over and over, Monette tells her. But Rachel reminds the woman that they need to figure out these swords and who's going to wield them. But Lorna sits up, knowing that she can't figure out a mystical prophecy on her own. Elsewhere in the Healing Gardens, Richter is clinging to life. Dying sucks, he gasps. Apocalypse looks up from his own table, ordering the healer to help the boy. No, scared, Richter gasps again. Apocalypse looks up at the healer, realizing that he is allowing the boy to die so that he can be resurrected. Then you will join him, Apocalypse growls, reaching out with his mind. Healer begins to gasp for air as his body becomes rigid, but suddenly, Apocalypse goes rigid as his mind is assaulted. Get out of my head, telepath, he bellows. But a voice tells him that she had to stop him from killing Healer. Images of his children stabbing him flash through his mind, but Apocalypse forces her out of his head. Sitting up in his bed, in the Arbor Magna hatchery, Xavier steps away from his duties, sensing that Lorna is troubled. She steps forward, asking them what the protocols for the casualties of war are. The others begin to question why she would ask that until Xavier dives into her mind. He sees the battle on Otherworld, senses the trap, and with these images in his mind, Xavier turns to the 5 of the Council and tells them to resurrect Rockslide and Richter within the hour. We simply must adapt in times of war, he tells them when they question this speed. Within the hour, the 2 mutants crawl out of their eggs, proving that they can still be revived from the dead, and death means nothing to mutants. Xavier steps forward, placing his hand on Richter's head and parting his memories back into him, but the man is still confused, and Xavier explains that Hope will use Polaris' memories of his death to fill in the blanks since his last Cerebro update. However, next he steps up to Rockslide, but when Xavier places the mutant's memories back into his mind, there's a feedback in Cerebro. He screams, falling to the floor, and the 5 also drop to the floor, hit by a psychic feedback. Elsewhere, the other Cerebro crackle with feedback. Polaris rushes over, grabbing the crumbling rock slide. Hold on, it's gonna be okay. Everything will be okay, she yells, and Rock Slide gasps as he begins to fall apart. The five struggle back to their feet, shocked that they can't feel the connection between themselves, Cerebro and Krakoa, anymore. They begin to freak out, trying to figure out what went wrong, and in their panic, they decide that the eggs must have been bad and need to be destroyed. Through her tears, Polaris looks up as Rockslide begins to reconstruct himself and stand before her. You're not Rockslide, she gasps. Xavier begins to wake up, pulling himself from the floor, and the five suddenly gasp as their connection is activated once again. As Xavier pulls himself to his feet, he is shocked by the destroyed eggs. No, it cannot be. Why are all the eggs destroyed? What have you done? They all point to Rockslide, and he reaches out with his mind, connecting to the creature's thoughts. This both is and is not Rockslide. He tells them that it is Rockslide, but not the one that they knew, and then he turns to Richter, trying to discern whether he is the same. Yo guys, I'm fine, I swear, Richter tells them. But Xavier suddenly stops the arguments, informing the group that is in fact Richter. Hope is the one who finally steps up, figuring out what happened to Rockslide. Later, she stands before the council, explaining that because Rockslide died in Otherworld, his Cerebro backups were corrupted. So who is this? Mystique asks, motioning towards the new Rockslide. This is a roll of the dice. The five explain that dying in Otherworld erases your identity, and Cerebro backup becomes an amalgamation of every possibility of what you might have been, which also explains why Cerebro briefly shorted out. Yes, it was the corrupted backup overriding everything that Rockslide was to us. Hope confirms with Professor X. Then we lost Rockslide forever, and it is through his terrible sacrifice that we gain a bleak understanding of our catastrophic failures, Emma tells the group. The five try to explain that the copy is a version of you, but Emma growls angrily at them. That is still death. This is a permanent death that we are discussing. Creating a new person does not overturn the loss of one of our people, she snaps. Standing, she angrily demands that they call off the tournament, but Xavier looks at her, reminding her of the horrors of Arakko and that their champions will most likely volunteer. Magneto nods, turning to his daughter, asking what she has discovered about the clues that Saturnine gave her. Polaris is speechless. You dare dally. We need to know this information if we're going to survive, Magneto shouts at his daughter. His angry words suddenly spark something in Polaris and she begins to recite. She drops the pieces of Rockslide that she was holding. Her head snaps back as she continues to mumble the prophecy. Magneto stands quickly, grabbing his daughter before she can fall to the ground. You're all right, daughter. Do you not see how easy that was? If you had listened to me sooner, Magneto tells her. But Lorna pulls away from his arms. Tears in her eyes as she reaches for the pieces of Rockslide that have fallen to the ground. She runs out of the room with Xavier telling Magneto to let her go. She needs to grieve. We have a visit to arrange, he tells his old friend. On the hillside, Lorna works tirelessly, placing the stones in the right places. And finally, as the sun peeks over the horizon, she is finished. She gathers the others to see what she has created, a casting circle. She explains as the champions retrieve their swords that they will return to find a position in this circle. When each of these symbols is touching its corresponding sword at the same time, it will open up a portal to the tournament. Tears fill her eyes as she tells them that to build this she had to use Rockslide's remains. And now it stands as a permanent memorial to him. Well damn. Let's get ready to show these Arakai our finest Krakoan diplomacy. Magic smiles as she steps into the crowd. She places the tip of her sword onto one of the sigils, causing it to light up. Pound the war drums. And that is the X of Swords chapters 1 and 2 with a brief recap so that you guys know what is going on in this world. Now, my battle plan right now is to probably do 3 to 4 issues of this every Friday to kind of get you guys going with X of Swords. It's a total of 22 issues, so you got about 2 months of X-Men stories. If these do well and you guys enjoy them, then we're going to bring you more X-Men, recap all the previous stuff. If you're wondering the individuals that are going to be involved, well, you're definitely going to have Wolverine, you're going to have Cyclops, you're going to have Xavier, you're going to have all your favorite X-Men popping in and out of this storyline. So let's get right into it, guys. Let's start working on the X-Men right here at Comicstorian. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. It really does help us more than you even know, trust me. And we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Comicstorian, where you can go to get early access to many of our videos. Thank you so much, Patreons and YouTube membership individuals. You guys are awesome, and I will see you all next time right here.